The night was supposed to be his. That was never in question. Madison Square Garden, September 7th, 2001. A sold-out crowd of 20,000 people who had paid whatever it took to be in that building. Michael Jackson's 30th anniversary celebration, 30 years since a 12-year-old from Gary, Indiana had walked out of his front door and started doing something that nobody had quite figured out how to stop since. This was the night to mark that. But somewhere between the dressing rooms and the stage, the night had quietly grown a second story. Justin Timberlake was 20 years old. NSync had just moved 42 million copies of No Strings Attached in under a year, which was the kind of number that made people in the music industry put down whatever they were holding and read the press release twice. He could sell out arenas. He had a voice that made other vocalists take notice, and the Michael Jackson comparison had been following him around for 2 years, not because he chased it, but because the press had decided it made a good story. And once the press decides something makes a good story, it tends to keep telling it. By September 2001, the next Michael Jackson framing was everywhere. Magazines ran the comparison. Television segments asked the question directly. Justin himself never seemed entirely comfortable with it. He talked about Michael the way people talk about something they genuinely revere, carefully, with some awareness that the words could easily fall short of the actual feeling. He had grown up with the music. He had studied the footage. He understood what he was looking at when he looked at Michael Jackson, or at least he thought he did. That night at MSG, he was about to find out the difference. NSync walked onto the stage and the building reacted in a way that surprised even people who had been working live events for a long time. 20,000 people who had been sitting through a long, celebratory evening arrived all at once. The floor vibrated. The upper sections were on their feet before the first chorus ended. Justin was at the center of it, moving with the kind of ease that only comes from years of doing something until it stops feeling like work and starts feeling like the natural state of things. He was locked in. The audience was locked in with him. For 15 minutes, MSG was entirely his. Backstage, people felt it. There is a specific thing that happens in the wings of a concert when a performance tips from good to something else. Crew members slow down, handlers drift toward the monitors. Conversations trail off mid-sentence. That signal was going off all through the backstage area during the NSYNC set. A journalist who had been filing notes for 3 hours paused and just watched. The conversations that followed were almost entirely about Justin, about what had just happened out there, about what it meant for the rest of the night. Nobody was saying anything against Michael. This was his building, his night, his 30 years. But the question had entered the room anyway, the way those questions always do, softly through the back, without introducing itself. Anyone who has spent time around live music knows that feeling. You watch something extraordinary and your brain, without asking permission, starts running the comparison, starts wondering, starts asking the thing nobody wants to be the first to say out loud. Here is what was happening on the other side of the wall. Michael was in his dressing room. The people around him that evening would describe him afterward as calm in a way that felt almost disorienting given the scale of what was about to happen. Not distant, just settled. Like someone who has been doing something for 3 decades and has long since stopped needing to manufacture energy before going on stage. The energy was already there. It had been there his entire life. He was not watching the monitors. He was not asking how things were going out front. He was getting ready in the specific, unhurried way that comes from having done this so many times that the preparation has become its own kind of ritual. Every choice already made. Every decision behind him. 30 years is a long time to do anything. Most people never find the one thing they want to do for 30 years. Michael had found his when he was 4 years old and had not stopped since. He had played rooms with 200 people and rooms with 200,000. He had performed through the kind of sustained public scrutiny that would have made most people reconsider their entire relationship with the word career. He had come back from things that would have ended other artists and walked back onto stages and reminded everyone in those rooms exactly why they had cared in the first place. He knew something that takes most performers a very long time to learn, if they ever get there. You cannot explain what you do to an audience. You cannot describe it or persuade someone into believing it. You can only show them, Every performer finds this out eventually. The ones who last are the ones who stop trying to convince and start trusting the work. The NSync had ended. 20,000 people exhaled. The particular exhale of a crowd that has witnessed something genuinely good and is now sitting in the warm aftermath of it. Still open, still present, waiting without quite knowing they are waiting. Then the lights change. The thing about Michael Jackson on a stage is that it does not arrive with a warning. One moment the stage is just a stage with lights and a microphone and whatever the crew has spent days setting up. Then he is on it, and the stage is no longer a stage. 20,000 people understood this within the first few seconds, not because of anything produced or announced or engineered to manufacture a reaction, just because of the way he moved in the first moments after the music started. There is a quality that exists in a small number of performers across any generation, a quality that resists accurate description without sounding like exaggeration, and Michael had it more completely than anyone who has ever stood in front of a crowd. It is not charisma exactly, though that was there too. It is something closer to certainty, the absolute absence of any gap between what a person is and what they are doing in that moment. When Michael was on a stage, there was no separation. It was just one thing. The crowd that had gone electric for NSYNC went somewhere past that. Justin Timberlake was standing in the wings. He had grown up watching Michael on VHS tapes worn soft from repeated playing. He understood at a factual level what Michael was capable of. He had carried that understanding for years, using it as a fixed point to orient his own work. He knew the catalog. He had studied the movement, the way Michael used a stage, the specific quality of the voice in a live setting versus a recorded one. He thought he knew what watching Michael perform would feel like. He was standing 10 feet from the stage, and the crowd was coming apart below him, and he started crying. He would talk about this moment in interviews for years afterward, always with the same quality in his voice, something that sat in the space between wonder and productive disorientation. He said he didn't know what to do with himself. That specific phrase kept coming back. He didn't know what to do with himself. Think about what that means, coming from someone who had just delivered one of the most electric performances of his own career, who had felt that specific charge of 20,000 people responding to him, who had every legitimate reason to feel grounded about what he was building. He watched Michael Jackson for 90 seconds and lost track of what to do with himself. That is not a failure. If anything, it is the opposite. Most people in that position find a way to protect themselves from what they are seeing. They qualify it internally. They find a frame that makes it smaller or less confronting. Justin stood there in the wings of Madison Square Garden and let it land. He did not reach for a way to process it that would make it fit more comfortably inside what he already knew. He just watched and felt what there was to feel. Michael was not performing for the person in the wings. He was not performing to answer the narrative that had been running in entertainment coverage for 2 years. None of that was in the room with him. What was in the room was 30 years of knowing exactly who he was when the music started. That is what 20,000 people were inside of. The 30-year anniversary made a specific kind of sense now that the program notes could not capture. It was not nostalgia. It was a demonstration of what 30 years of doing one thing completely, without drift, actually produces in a person. You stop performing at that level. You simply are it. The doing and the being fold into each other until there is no way to tell where one ends and the other begins. The night ended the way those nights end. People filtered out. The building returned to itself. The conversations in cars and on sidewalks afterward were different from what anyone had come in expecting to have. The press had arrived with a specific angle about generational transition. Some of those stories still got filed, but they read differently when they ran. The framing kept shifting mid-sentence. The conclusion kept resisting the setup. When journalists asked Justin about the night and the days that followed, he did not give careful, managed answers. He said what he had seen. He said what it had made him feel. He said that watching Michael perform had clarified something for him about the difference between being very good at something and being the person who defined what that something is. The language changed from interview to interview, but the core of it held. That answer, more than any review, said what the night actually was. The 30th anniversary celebration is remembered as a Michael Jackson night. Not because anyone else fell short. Justin delivered something real. But Michael walked onto that stage at his own celebration, and the question that had been floating around the building quietly answered itself without anyone having to say it directly. Justin Timberlake went on to build a career that belongs entirely to him. He found his own voice, his own relationship with audiences, his own sense of what connecting with people through music actually requires. The people who watched his work in the years after MSG say something in him settled, that he seemed to stop reaching towards something external and started building more from the inside. Maybe standing in those wings gave him something to orient around, a clear and undeniable picture of the thing he had been trying to understand since he was a kid. You stop chasing a thing once you've seen it clearly enough to understand what it actually is. You stop trying to become it. You start asking a different question, which is what only you can do. Michael never spoke about Justin in terms of rivalry. That was not his frame. He spoke about young artists with genuine warmth, talked about believing in people who were building something, talked about what it had meant to him when the right people took his work seriously at the right time. He took Justin's work seriously. He said so. That is a quieter story than the one the entertainment press wanted to tell in the fall of 2001. It doesn't work as well as a headline, but it is the one that actually happened. Two artists in the same building on the same night. One of them walked out with something answered that he hadn't fully known was a question. The other walked out as exactly what he had walked in as, which was the only proof that ever needed to exist. The king did not say a word about it. He never had to. The stage had already said everything, the way it always did, the way it always would.